Today, I want to help you understand compression a little bit more by visualizing it. It's important to know what the controls do and how the controls sound, but I think a lot of us are visual learners, and unfortunately, a lot of compressors don't give you enough visual feedback to really know what's going on. But of course, when you're looking at a DAW, you see waveforms just like this on screen, and it's really easy to tell in a waveform what's going on with the dynamics because the taller it is, the louder it is. And while most compressors do show a gain reduction meter, they don't show exactly what happens to the waveform, and that's what this visualizer does. And so we have all the standard controls from a compressor, the threshold, ratio, attack, release, and makeup gain, and we can see exactly how each affects the sound. Now, we're not going to listen to any audio examples. This is going to be a purely conceptual tutorial today. But I think after going through this, you're going to have a much better understanding of each control when you're using it in context. So let's go from top to bottom here. We have our threshold, which is going to determine at what point the compression is going to kick in. So that's our gray line here. Now, we're not seeing a change to the visualizer because our ratio is at 1. And a 1-to-1 ratio would mean exactly what goes into this compressor comes out. So if we increase the ratio, you'll see immediately, okay, the green is our original uncompressed input volume, and the blue is our compressed output volume. This red wave at the top is another way of visualizing how much volume we're reducing. So as we increase the ratio, we get more and more compression. And you'll notice it's pulling it down towards our threshold because the threshold is determining, hey, what is too loud? So if the threshold is really high, again, we don't get any compression until we lower that threshold. And as we increase that ratio, we tighten and tighten it more towards that threshold. All right, so now let's go to the attack and the release, which right now are at their slowest settings. But check out what happens as we speed up the attack time. We start to see more squeezing of the sound, and notice these big spikes here. This initial spike that was hardly getting any compression before is now being squeezed because the compressor is fast enough to grab this short period of time. And again, you can see it pulling it down towards the threshold. Now, if we keep that attack time and that ratio and change the threshold, we still see that general shaping going on. And so if you think about using that in context, well, if you've got a really punchy snare drum or a really snappy picked acoustic guitar, that faster attack time will be able to grab that moment and reduce it, whereas that slower attack time isn't going to be fast enough to grab that moment. All right, so what about the release? As we speed that up, you'll notice more and more sustain to the point where now with a fast attack and a fast release, plus that high ratio, the volume is just pinned to the threshold the entire time until the input volume is simply below the compression. We're not actually compressing this part of the signal unless we were to lower the threshold even further. And again, you can imagine what this would sound like. This is just one blob of omnipresent sound. And depending what you're going for, that might be a good thing. Now, of course, our original input volume is way up here, and our output is down here. And so that's where the last control, the makeup output gain, comes in handy, where we can increase that, where we can now level match the output volume more towards the input volume for a more fair comparison and to maintain the level in the mix. And so now you can get a really clear idea for how the dynamic has changed. And again, if we play with the attack and release, well, let's slow the attack down again. And so now this is where you'll hear someone saying, oh, you got to use a slow attack to make it sound really punchy. We have a really leveled off volume here, but we've maintained and even exaggerated this initial impact of this first moment. And we have reduced this second one a little bit, but it's still maintained to some degree. So again, your punchy snare drum, that slower attack is going to help maintain more and more punch. I mean, now we can't even see how punchy that is. Look at that. Now let's see what happens when we slow the release back down. And instead of it being completely flatlined, it more and more begins to resemble that original contour. And so now we've got this exaggerated attack and a little bit of sustain, but not quite as flattened off with that fast release. A little bit more of a natural release with that slower time. But also you might start to hear the sound pump at this rate. If we speed the attack up, you might get to see that. So we compress and then it's going to swell right back in, right? Rather than being like pop, and then you have sustain, it's going to go pop, and it's going to kind of tuck it in for a moment and then swell back in. That's where you're going to hear that pumping sound that people will describe with compression, especially when you've got a slow attack and a slower release. Now, unfortunately, there's no values here of, milliseconds. We don't know how long this time frame is, but you still get an idea for how those time parameters work. And now, last but not least, we were at a 10-to-1 ratio. And if we decrease that, you'll start to see, instead of pinning towards the threshold, we loosen up a little bit. We get a completely different style of control, where you see we exaggerate just a little bit of attack, and we gain just a little bit of sustain because we're at a very low ratio of 2.5 to 1. And again, all these parameters are still in play, so you could speed up the attack, speed up the release. And again, you still maintain some of that original contour of the volume because we're at that low ratio. It's only when you increase that ratio do you get that limiting and squeezing effect to the fullest extent. And again, this is why compression is so difficult to learn because all of these parameters are interdependent on one another. Now, if you want to play around with this visualizer yourself, I'll leave the link in the description down below with a bunch of other resources where you can learn about compression and especially doing some ear training. I've got a handful of videos on that I think you'll enjoy. So check those out. And if this video helped you today, drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching Roy Thompson Audio today, and I'll see you next time.